Notice the dip in the street because that was the River Poll. Now, where the gardens of Dublin Castle are now, the Poll emptied out into a huge dark-coloured pool, or as you would call it in Irish, Dublin, meaning, are you ready for this? Blackpool. The actual name for Dublin is Blackpool. But the Vikings couldn't pronounce it, so they called it Dublin, which of course became Dublin. Now, I'd say that if you've never been to Dublin in your life, first time here, you'd probably still recognize this famous little cast iron pedestrian bridge that we'll pass under now. It's on all the postcards and the souvenir shops. And of course, it's nicknamed the Halfpenny Bridge, because it used to cost a halfpenny or a half of a penny to cross this bridge for 100 years. 1816 until 1916, a halfpenny's toll. The thing about the halfpenny is that we've been calling it that for so long, everyone has forgotten its actual name, which is the Wellington Bridge. And it's on Wellington Quay. And if we carried up the Liffey to Phoenix Park, you'd see the Wellington Monument. I could go on. Of course, it's all named after the Duke of Wellington because he was famous not only for defeating Napoleon, but being a Dubliner himself. Being an Anglo-Irish aristocracy gentleman, he was also famous for being a little bit anti-Irish. In fact, he quite famously stood up in the House of Irish Parliament one morning and said, see here, just because one happens to be born in a stable does not necessarily make one a horse. To which another famous gentleman stood up and replied, this may be well true in your case, sir, but it certainly makes one an ass. And that is a true story, I'll have you know. We know this because our skipper Paul was there. 22 acres of Dublin 2 are right known as Temple Bar, which historically was the Merchants' Quarter. After a lot of European Union investment, it opened in 1991 as the Cultural Quarter. Still maintains all of its narrow 18th century cobblestone streets, art galleries as well, cafes, restaurants, loads of them. You might even find a place in there to have a drink. How we doing? Okay, folks. We're going to squeeze under O'Connell Bridge. Hopefully we will fit. What does help is just take a deep breath or close your eyes. And exhale. This bridge just above your heads, O'Connell Bridge. Main bridge in the city centre and dead centre of the city. And it takes so long to pass under this bridge because it's actually the only bridge in all of Europe wider than long. 5 meters wider than long as well, I might add. 45 long, 50 wide. Can I suggest one thing quickly? How about a hand for Paul, the skipper? You have no idea how much concentration was needed. Whew. I wouldn't applaud just yet, we have one more bridge to go. Going off to these walls for a moment, 1716 this section was finished. Sorry. But before that, the Liffey was up to 4 times as wide as it is now. And to our right here, this area is where it swelled and went south. You see that beautiful Celtic cross? Well, if you peeked up over the wall there, of course you can see the roofs of Trinity College, founded by Elizabeth I in 1592. Without these walls here, at high tide as it is right now, the Liffey actually reached where Trinity College is these days. Now, I've told friends this, when we're in that area, they always look at me as though I'm spinning them a yarn, and I say, okay, to prove my point. And you can see it for yourself, folks. The end of that street on this side of Trinity, in the middle of a traffic island, is a 14-foot standing stone. It's called the Long Stone. And it's there because it marks the exact spot Norwegian Vikings, the first time they ever arrived here, back around 790 AD, got out of their boat and touched foot on land, as was the Viking tradition. And of course, they didn't land here. They landed over there. Now, interestingly, the stone placed there by the Vikings was there right up until the mid-1700s when, as things occasionally do here in our fair city, it disappeared. Somebody nicked a 14-foot stone. Students from Trinity College pulling a prank is what's thought, and it was never found, just replaced. Now, my my favorite part of the tour. When I have a few moments to go on about one of my favorite buildings in our city, the beautiful Customs House. Opened in 1793 for business, after a Londoner called James Gandon built it on a patch of swamp outside the city, as it was even then, with a lot of controversy. Napper Tandy and his gang came down, caused a riot on the building site, but he persevered. And he chose this spot because we're at a quite a sharp bend in the river right now. So that beautiful lady on top of that dome could be seen for miles. That's a lady of commerce looking out to the sea. Of course, she's patiently watching for all the ships coming in with their cargo on board, because the purpose of this gorgeous building was to collect tax. Some things never change. Tax on everything coming in or leaving this coastal city. So where you're sitting at this moment, this section here was congested with ships for nearly 200 years. This was the Dublin port of its time. Back up here, I have a nice print of a 19th century sketch depicting just that very scene where we are now. Now, Paul's just slowed the vessel right down here and brought us close into the wall, take advantage of this high tide, just to give every one of you such a close view of these hauntingly detailed sculptures. Obviously speak for themselves, but there are a total of 6 adults. All the worldly goods bundled up in their arms there as they walk along. And of course, they represent people who are walking down the quayside to get onto a ship to take them to Canada or the States, because that's our memorial to the potato famine, 1845 to 1850. Ungordamora in Irish it's known as, meaning the Great Hunger. If you get a chance to see those up close, so worth it. By a Dublin sculptor, his name is Rowan Gillespie, and the man is one of the most talented sculptors I've ever seen. Of course, those sculptures are where they are because so many actually left from this wall here to our left during famine times. And we're going to leave the city behind us officially now, or, well, when we pass under the Sean O'Casey Bridge here, better known as the Quiver over the river, because it shakes a lot as you walk across this. The other side of it, Dublin Stocklands, the most modern area of Dublin that we have. But it was an area of industry until the 60s. In fact, for the next while, when you're looking off at banks, offices, high-end apartments, imagine cattle yards to ship the cattle to Liverpool, warehouses, mainly though, coal, both sides of the river, coal sheds, coal merchants. Now we don't have coal in Ireland. They brought it in every morning at 7 a.m. from England and Wales. So hundreds of men were on these walls as well, waiting for those coal ships. And when they arrived, they used to throw their empty cigarette packs down on the coal to reserve their place for a day's work, which is precious to many, until we stopped using coal and moved our port down to the Irish Sea. And that's when this area became forgotten about, essentially. And I'll tell you what happened down here, before I do though. Back to the famine, of course, 1848-49, and the type of ship that took everyone across the water. The Jeannie Johnson is an exact replica of an original famine emigrant ship. Now this replica was only finished in 2002. Millions of euro and 4 years to construct on an anniversary of the famine. She was a sail training ship for years. She's crossed the Atlantic herself a few times. She's not going anywhere now though, because it's open to the public 7 days a week. Now, best part is, take your ticket from this cruise, and it gives you a discount off admission, where Paul, the tour guide, takes you throughout the ship for 45 minutes, telling you the story of the Jeannie Johnson, which is unbelievable. It wasn't built in Ireland, as that one was. It was built in Canada, Quebec City, purchased by an Irishman then. And over the next 7 years, they made 16 voyages across the Atlantic, from Tralee to Quebec mainly, 1 trip to New York, 1 to Baltimore, and 14 to Quebec City. A ticket from Tralee to Quebec, £3.10. Journey time, minimum 6 weeks. And here's the most amazing part. In those 16 voyages, they carried over 2,800 passengers. And do you know how many of them died on the ship? Not one. It's extraordinary and true. It had a perfect safety record, not a life lost. It's the only case of its kind I know of, in fact. Would anyone like to know why no one ever died? You really should take the tour, because they'll probably tell you. Now, how quickly things have changed. All of a sudden, apartments, restaurants, cafes. So when we moved our port, this area became forgotten about, as I mentioned, and we'll put it this way. I actually remember, and I'm not that old, I'll be 26 in July. I remember when all of this was empty warehouses, 9 years ago. 14 years ago, though, is when they came out with a 14-year plan to begin utterly transforming over 133 acres of Dublin. Now that plan was officially completed last September, when we had the grand opening of the new International Conference Centre coming on our left here in a few moments. Before that though, if you look up through the roof at this massive, and I think beautiful harp, not just the instrument, the traditional symbol of Ireland on its side. Our latest bridge, the Samuel Beckett Bridge, which was delivered to Dublin by 2 barge, all the way from Rotterdam in the Netherlands, 628 miles away, last May. And it made the journey in 5 days. The best part is when we turn around, every one of you, I promise, a full panoramic view of the entire city as well as the bridge. Now, as mentioned, the new International Conference Centre here, here's the good news. It's already booked out for nearly the next 4 years, and its auditorium seats 2,300, so it's actually bringing quite a lot of business to our town. Amazingly, those panes of glass weigh half a ton each. And if you come down here once the sun starts to go down, you'll see that those bands around the glass, they light up in neon colors, continuously changing, up and down, reflecting off the water. It's very nice. Some in Dublin are calling that building the tube in the cube, and others are just simply calling it the pint. Can I share my idea with you? Because I think it was good as well as logical. Why not tint the glass black, have a white bit across the top, and get the Guinness brewery to pay for it? Thank you. And they wouldn't listen to me. It's only a matter of time. Now, speaking of pints of Guinness, there's a vessel that looks like one off to our left called the Killarney. That's Killarney in English. And built here in 1964. Spent 40 years in Cork City going out to the harbour collecting really wealthy people off the transatlantic ships. Since 2007, it's a Blue River Bistro and Bar, Key 16 restaurant. So you can do as those people are doing right now and sit out on the deck yourself in the searing Irish heat, blistering Dublin sun, and enjoy a mojito. Obviously, we don't have many older buildings remaining down here. Most were torn down. They were in a bit of a state, though, to be honest. 2 of them off to our left here. And I like, especially when I have Dubs on board, I always kind of include this building. This admittedly slightly run down red brick building off on our left that's used for storage these days, because sadly no one in Dublin these days would have any idea that that was a beautiful bustling hotel for generations, until the early 30s in fact. I think they should have a plaque or something there. It was called the Railway Hotel, and people down in this area most times just called it the Emigrants Hotel. So many every year would spend their last night in Ireland in there, because when they got up in the morning they'd walk down to these stairs off to your left and get onto a ship to go to England to try and find some work. In fact, people left, so many left from these stairs to find work throughout not just the 40s or 50s, but through the 80s in particular, that as I'm saying this, there's estimated to be more people in Great Britain of Irish ancestry than there are currently people living in Ireland, and the population here stands at 4.5 million. Population in Dublin, same as Copenhagen, Denmark, actually, about 1.5. The Ocean Nova cruise ship came in a few days ago. They are just getting ready to depart. See how wide the Liffey's become? Of course, it gets even wider because Dublin Bay just out in front of you. So we're going to have to turn around here shortly, or we'll be on our way to Holyhead, Wales, which incidentally is the closest land, just 58 miles out in front of you. Now, before we turn around, off to your left, Dublin's O2, 1988. Harry Crosby, respected Dublin man, turned an empty warehouse into a massive concert theatre called The Point. Any big name that ever played Dublin played it, and Mr. Crosby then turned that into Dublin's O2 last year. The good news is that not only does it have state-of-the-art acoustics, it's one of Europe's largest indoor music amphitheaters. 160 plus concerts in there every year. The bad news is simply that Justin Bieber played in there about a month ago. Do you know what? I'm going to share something really personal with you now, if you don't mind. 3 times something very dear to all of our hearts happened in that building, called the Eurovision Song Contest. But during Eurovision of 1994, the very first public performance ever of something called Riverdance took place, starring not just Michael Flatley, but my future wife, Jean Butler. Thank you. And she just doesn't realize it yet. Although they've lifted the restraining order finally.
Not live, but yeah.
We're going to go to one live.
Different.
One is very close.
Sorry folks, do you remember when I had promised every one of you a beautiful panoramic view of a lift there? And you certainly see what I meant about the new bridge. I just find it amazing that the majority of everything we're looking at is from about 8 to 9 years. Let me mention this as well, folks. Next to Dublin's O2, you see that Ferris wheel. That is called the Wheel of Dublin. Will be for the next 4 years. Formerly the Wheel of Belfast that was sitting next to City Hall there. €9 takes an adult around it about 5 times. Now, if you want to come down here, hop on the tram. Simple as. €2 for anywhere in the greater Dublin area. The O2 is the last stop. You seldom have to wait for it. It's actually a brilliant service. The skipper Paul here and myself went on the Wheel of Dublin last year, and which was great. The only problem is that once we got to the top, the skipper here became uncontrollable and began weeping and shaking, crying for his mother. Okay, it was me. I admit it. Now, looking off to our left there, in the distance, the old 18th century Buckingham Locks still being used. The Grand Canal dock sign, U2's second album cover, had the lad standing in front of that very sign. But it's my pleasure to present the new Aviva Stadium. Follow the River Dodder as it comes out from the suburbs into the Liffey there. Beyond the old Ringsend Bridge from 1803. And look at the Aviva, what a good job they did. That was the Lansdowne Road Stadium.